Welcome everyone to the Mountain View City Council's Neighborhood Committee meeting tonight for December the 10th. We will call this meeting to order, but prior to it, I would like to announce that this meeting will be conducted in accordance with the State of California Executive Order N29-20 dated March 17th, 2020. All members of the Council Neighborhood Committee are participating in this meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the meeting live may do so on YouTube at mountainview.gov/YouTube. As noted on the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral public comments during the public comment period for an item by signing up at mountainview.gov/CNC_speakers. Any emails and voicemails received by 5 p.m. Wednesday, December 9th were forwarded to the Council Neighborhood Committee. Emails received after 5 p.m. or prior to the close of public comment prior for the period for the agenda item will be read into the record by staff, and any voicemail messages received will be played by staff. All votes will be taken by roll call vote. Now I will ask staff to proceed with a roll call. Anna? Or who's our
Lisa, I think you're
secretary?
muted.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Lisa is
Okay.
our roll call secretary. Okay.
I am.
Congratulations.
Committee members and staff, please respond when I call your name. Committee members, Mayor Abakoga.
Here.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Here.
Thank you. And Councilmember and Chair McAllister.
Here.
Okay. And for staff for Housing and Neighborhood Services, we have Interim Manager and Assistant Community Development Director, Wayne Chen.
I guess he's here. Well, we can see him. There's a visual. We'll go with the visual.
Assistant Planner, Anna Salvador.
Here.
And I'm serving as your secretary, Lisa Roach.
Okay. Anna got promoted or demoted, one or the other. So either way, it's glad to have you, Lisa. Okay, we will go now to item 3 on the agenda, minutes approval. Minutes for the April 30th, 2020 meeting have been delivered to committee members and copies posted on the City Hall bulletin board. If there are no corrections or addition, a motion is ordered to approve these minutes. Does any member of the committee have comments or questions on the minutes? Would any member of the public online? Do we have people online?
There's
Zero
no
attendance.
one.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's good. I should have looked at the attendance. Keep an eye on that. Okay, just in sake somebody calls, would any member of the public online like to provide comments on an item on the minutes? Seeing no attendees at this time. If so, please raise your hand. Okay. Staff, okay, I'll ask staff. Did you receive any public comments on this item by voicemail?
We did not.
Okay, have you received public comment on this item by email since December 9th at 5 p.m.?
We have not received any public comment.
Okay. Are there, okay, since there are no additional people in the public, or we'll move right along to oral communication. Since there's no attendees, well, somebody might call, right? So let's go. This portion.
Chair, do you need a motion to approve the minutes?
You know, we could. We could do that. Well, that's right. Okay. Yeah, as the former chair of this committee, Lucas Ramirez reminded me, we should approve the minutes. So, do I hear a motion?
I'm happy to move to approve the minutes. Okay,
is there a second?
I guess I'll second that.
Okay. I like the quick response, Okay. Ms. Secretary, could we have a roll call vote, please? Madam Secretary, can we have a roll?
This is my first time doing a roll call vote for, or doing the roll call for a vote. We had a motion by Lucas Ramirez, second by Mayor Abakoga, and I would assume that everybody is in favor and the motion passes.
Okay, that was a good one. Good. Okay, now we will go to oral communication. Still seeing no attendees. In case somebody calls in the brief moment, this portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on the topic for up to 3 minutes during the section. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public online like to, since we don't have anybody? If so, check to see, staff, did you receive any public comments on this item by voicemail?
We did not receive any public comment.
Have you received public comments on this item by email since December 9th at 5 p.m.?
No, we have not.
Did staff receive any comments by mail pigeon since 9 o'clock? Okay. Santa Slate, did we receive anything from Santa Slate? Okay. Okay, seeing there's no, staff has not had to receive any emails or public, I will then close public oral communication and we'll move to unfinished business. There was none. We will now move to proceed to item number 6, review and refinement of the 2020 Council Neighborhood Committee Program. And it appears that we have a staff presentation.
Alrighty, good afternoon, Council Neighborhoods Committee. My name again is Anna Salvador. I'm an assistant planner in the Housing and Neighborhoods Division. The purpose of the presentation this afternoon is to review the major accomplishments of the year and talk through a little bit the COVID-19 impacts to traditional programming. I'll also continue a discussion from previous regular committee meetings regarding concerns with the grant funding formula. The CNC oversees 2 major neighborhood programs, which are the neighborhood meetings and the grant program. There are 7 neighborhood areas in the city, and the committee hosts a neighborhood meeting in each of these areas every 2 years. This year was the first year in the 2-year cycle, and the committee hosted 4 meetings this year. A total of 192 attendees participated in these meetings. The meetings for the remaining 3 neighborhoods will be held in 2021. Additionally, for the second year in a row, the full grant budget of $30,000 was awarded to a total of 18 different neighborhood groups. A number of adjustments were made to regular programming due to restrictions related to COVID-19. All of the neighborhood meetings, as well as some of the regular meetings, including this one, were shifted to a virtual format, and there was a loss of that face-to-face interaction, which is so appreciated at the in-person meetings. Staff provided multiple methods to continue to engage with the public. Members of the public were able to pre-submit questions, also submit questions during the meeting, and we even added a verbal comment component based on feedback received by the community in the last neighborhood meeting. Another shift occurred around meeting start time. So in the past, these meetings were held in the evening. The virtual meetings were shifted to a 4 p.m. start time, anticipating that some individuals may not be able to attend at the new time. Staff did provide written responses to questions that were submitted via email, and we also shared recordings of the meeting upon request. Despite the shift in formatting, the average attendance at each of these meetings was comparable to the in-person ones that were held in 2019. The grant program was also impacted by COVID-19. Staff encouraged neighborhood groups to kind of network virtually rather than the in-person networking dinner that ended up being canceled. And we did this through sharing of contact information and ideas as groups were adjusting their formatting due to COVID-19. So we also did provide additional support to neighborhood groups to kind of help them transition their programming to COVID-safe alternatives while still working within the eligible expenses of the grant program. And ultimately, the goal was to help groups still spend down their grant awards because the funds don't roll over year to year. And the goal was really to encourage programming that continued to build community, especially during the current circumstances. So I'm kind of going to transition now and focus on the grant program itself. The purpose of the neighborhood grant program is to encourage participation and strengthen neighborhoods. The way that this is done is through funding of programming and activities that foster interaction and community. The current budget for the program is $30,000, and both formal neighborhood associations as well as informal groups are eligible to apply as long as their grant proposals focus on building community, enhancing the neighborhood. The current program formula is $6 per household with a maximum of $2,000 per neighborhood. And currently through the program, new groups are also eligible for an additional $100 bonus when they apply for the first time. This year, input was received regarding aspects of the funding formula, and staff was directed to explore options to adjust the formula. The funding formula has been modified over time based on the needs and goals of the program. And as you can see on the screen, the per household amount has been as high as $15 and as low as $3 per household. Also, the program budget hasn't increased since 2013. And all these changes over time really focused on making sure that the program was meeting its goals or achieving its goals of providing funding to neighborhood groups to further build community within the neighborhoods. Discussions to adjust the formula have resurfaced again for reasons primarily of equity and budget. There continues to be a lot of interest in the grant program, and maxing out the grant budget over the last 2 years with current active groups has put limitations on the resources that are available for new groups that may also be interested in the program. Additionally, the variation in group size within the program itself can create a disadvantage for larger groups. Groups within the program currently vary in size from 103 households to over 3,500 households. And the $6 per household amount is maxed out for groups with more than 330 households. And of the current active groups, 14 of them have more than that $330 kind of optimization of the grant program. As groups increase in size and the number of households that they serve, they receive increasingly smaller amounts per household the larger they get. And under the current system, smaller groups receive 10 times more per household than the largest groups. And this is kind of where that key equity concern comes into play. In terms of budget, the budget increases and formula adjustments have occurred on a case-by-case basis as the program has grown. The groups that are currently applying are requesting more money up to the maximum. So even though in the past there has been years where there's more groups, active groups than what are currently active, the groups that are applying currently are asking for more money up to what the maximum that they're allowed. This has created funding limitations for new groups as the more established, consistent groups are maxing out the current budget. And the committee could consider establishing thresholds for when budget increases should be discussed. Some examples of thresholds that could be considered are oversubscription in the program, changes in population within neighborhoods, as well as when the number of applications reach a certain level. Establishing criteria such as these kind of simplifies the evaluation process for staff and could automate the budget increase process to some degree rather than having to revisit every couple of years, which has been the current standard. Staff evaluated the size of the program and funding formula itself, potentially tying automatic budget increases to CPI. After review of how this would fit into the overall city budget process, increases in CPI could not really be supported within the current budget constraints. So all changes to the funding formula were considered based on the current program budget of $30,000. And staff considered a number of different kind of programmatic components, including tying program budget to the household served, lowering the per household amount, and even a tier system with per group maximums tied to group size. We also explored other options such as a cash match system or a competitive process above some basic eligibility for all groups. We received input from the committee and neighborhood groups, and the committee was really interested in seeing options that took into account changes in population and costs. We also conducted outreach over the summer with neighborhood groups. So we sent out a survey, and we also held a follow-up Zoom call to kind of get additional information and request additional feedback. And kind of the primary feedback from this group was that overall, most groups were happy with the amount of funds that they've received. Some had concerns, but all the groups wanted to keep the program as simple and straightforward as possible. With all of this feedback and analysis in mind, staff is proposing the following tier system. And this tier system breaks down groups by the number of households and establishes maximum for each tier accordingly. I'd like to highlight that the baseline maximum of $1,000 for the smallest tier is kind of based on reviewing past application cycles. $1,000 seems to be kind of what is needed to cover regular program costs, but also make the program attractive to new groups, new group formation as well. And under the proposed tier system, there isn't a max per household, which has been kind of a key component of past formulas, but we did include it here for demonstration purposes. And as you can see, although the per household amount is not equal between the different tiers, it is more equitable within the $30,000 budget. And that 10 times disparity between the smallest groups and the larger groups has been reduced somewhat. Also, like to call out that the majority of the groups do fall below that 1,500 household threshold. So most groups would receive comparable amounts to what they are getting currently. The other thing to consider with this too is any future increase to the budget could be applied in such a way that per household amount for the larger groups begins to kind of move closer towards what that per household amount is for smaller groups. And the questions up for discussion this afternoon by the committee are, does the CNC want to change the funding formula system to the proposed tiers? Does the CNC want to make a recommendation to council to increase the grant program budget? And are there any other proposed changes to CNC programs outside of those related to the grants program and the funding formula? And then briefly, I just want to touch on the upcoming programming in 2021. So we'll, like I mentioned earlier, be visiting the remaining 3 neighborhood groups in this current cycle, or sorry, neighborhood areas in the current cycle. And then also the grant application opens again in spring 2021. And we do anticipate 3 regular meetings during that year as well. This concludes my presentation, so I'll pass it back to Chair McAllister.
Yes. Okay. Are there any committee questions? Lucas, well, you guys both take yourselves off of mute so we can have a dialogue going here. Please, thank you.
I think your hand up first.
Oh, no, you did. Lucas, go ahead.
Thank you. Just one quick question. So I can't recall from the staff report, is there a minimum number of households who would be eligible? So for the first tier, less than 150 households, in practice, is there a minimum?
Anna, you're on mute.
There we go. In practice, there hasn't really been a minimum like group size established. I don't, not that I've seen that has that occurred.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you.
That's all you got? Yeah, I'm having fun with this. Mayor Margaret Abby Koga.
Thank you, Chair McAllister.
You had to think about that.
um, so when you were looking at, you mentioned CPI, and that was actually something I was thinking of too. But what was the reasoning behind not proposing this? Was your interest to stay within the 30,000, or were there other considerations? You mentioned the budget process. Is it because it's the CPI fluctuates and it's hard to predict, or what were the other considerations?
Yeah, so when we looked at CPI, we considered increasing the per group amount maximum by CPI, but also the overall budget by CPI. The concerns were that CPI varies from year to year, and it wouldn't actually realize a significant increase in funds available for the groups necessarily. Okay. Yeah.
And that's the only question I have. I have comments, so I'll just wait. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, God. Okay, so I got a few questions. So there's total of 19 neighborhoods, but only 18 applied this last year.
At its height, there's been a total of 19 neighborhoods that have applied, but it's kind of, some groups fade and new groups are formed over time, so it's not necessarily the same 19 groups all the time.
Because you said 18, so if we counted all the groups that might have faded or whatever, but is there a formal process to become a neighborhood?
We do provide assistance if groups want to formally become a neighborhood association in terms of how to create bylaws and those types of things in order to formally become a neighborhood association. But it's not a component to be eligible to participate in the program. So
how many, if we were to look at all past and present neighborhoods, how many neighborhood groups do we have? Do you know?
I believe I looked at this and I think it's around 22, but there are some overlap in the boundaries. So some active groups currently overlap with groups that have participated in the program in the past. So I don't necessarily think that's an accurate depiction of the number of groups that could be active currently. Okay.
You mentioned early in your presentation that you were helping neighborhood groups help spend down the money. Why were you thinking that?
Well, that was feedback based on our meeting with the committee in February. There were concerns at that time before the end of that grant cycle that groups who were normally host like summer block parties and things wouldn't be able to do that type of in-person event. And so we encourage groups to maybe find ways of spending their funds in other ways or shifting how their event was hosted, whether it's purchasing a Zoom account so that they could host their event virtually and things like that.
Okay, because I know they were talking about doing DoorDash food, and we go, no, that's not the intent. So, okay. Mm-hmm. Do we have any, when they fill out their grant forms or their request for money, do they give us a number of participants in their activities?
Yeah, they provide an estimate about how many households they anticipate, and it's generally based on attendance in years previous because most of these events are annual.
Okay, so when we're going to be discussing these dollar amounts, you could have a 1,500 household neighborhood and get maybe as many as 150 as a small one, correct?
Yeah,
so that's correct. Just because it's a large neighborhood, it would be interesting to follow up somewhere along the line of participation, because just because you have 1,500 units and you only get 200 people participating, why should you get the $250, whereas a small group might be a tighter group? So okay, that's one of my questions. And do we have an idea of the main way these groups communicate now? You were talking about websites. And so does everybody have a website pretty much now?
Yeah, a lot of groups, especially during this last year, beefed up their websites or worked to spent their money on domains and things of that nature.
So in the past, we used to fund paper newsletters. Are we discouraging people to go to the websites, form their little neighborhood versus doing neighborhood newsletters?
We encourage groups to do both. So if there's ways of doing print materials and things, one of the activities that we were recommending are like printables or coloring pages that they could distribute to households that the children of the neighborhood could use, and other ways of gaining awareness of the neighborhood association for future programming.
Also, so when I was looking at your chart, and thank you for providing the one chart that showed the chart number 5, how we were going along. So in 2013, I think Margaret and I did a pretty good job of coming up with the 30,000 or something along that line. And it kept working along pretty good until it served us well for 5 years, which is a pretty long time. And in the current report, you show that we oversubscribed by, say, $1,200 round up. Do you know how much we oversubscribed last year? Was it 2019? No, this is 2020. The $1,200, $1,169, was that for 2020?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you have any in 19 how much we oversubscribed by?
It was pretty comparable. I think it was like $1,140 or somewhere around there.
Well, that's not too bad for ballpark and some increases. Okay, and okay, those are my questions for now. Council, any more questions? Otherwise, I will go to the staff to ask. I still don't see any attendees, but I am obligated to ask staff, did you receive any public comments on this item by voicemail?
We did not.
Have you received public comment on this item by email since December 9th at 5 p.m.?
We have not.
Okay, I guess we'll go back now to committee discussion. So could you put up your questions for us, please?
Mm-hmm.
May I ask a quick follow-up question to something you had asked about, Chair McAllister? And that's for the years that were oversubscribed, if memory serves, some of those related to requests that were beyond what the neighborhood was eligible for. So even though we may have been oversubscribed in practice, those neighborhoods wouldn't have been eligible anyway. Do you recall offhand how much of the oversubscription wouldn't have been eligible anyway?
That's a great question. I would have to look back. I don't remember offhand how that broke down. I do know another component of the oversubscription, though I don't know if this is significant, is that at least in 2019, I think we had a couple new groups. And so that additional $100 benefit contributed to that oversubscription to some degree.
Councilmember Ramirez, you're only limited to one quick question. So just keep that. Okay.
I've used that. Thanks.
Okay, so any other discussions you guys have? Any things that you want to bring up? Because I'll start talking away if the mayor wants something to say something. Yeah.
Before you jump in.
I wouldn't. I'm letting you.
So I do support the tiers. I think I need to look at it and maybe you can come back to me, but I wanted to tweak it a bit. I was trying to make it more equitable in terms of numbers of households. Let me see if I can. I'll have to look for it. I had it up and I just lost it, but oh, here we go. So my thought was,
Are you looking at table 6?
yes, table 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it looked like, so the 150 households or less seems to get the most amount. So if you go from there to 1,000, that 850 household difference only amounts to $500 more. So it just doesn't seem like a much for that growth in numbers and households. So I wanted to see if we could shift that somehow. But in order to do that, think that I think it's time for us to request to the council an increase in the budget. So it looks like we've been increasing every 6 to 7 years. And I think we're at that point now. Our city has grown and maybe, and I don't know if maybe we want to, if we can time this, and we can look at it when we see our census numbers, but I also suspect that our city population has grown quite a bit in the last 10 years. And so I think we need to get this neighborhood program to also increase to match that growth in our city. So my thought was, I originally thought CPI would be an ideal way to just make it automatic, but I understand just the fluctuations. So, and maybe we don't need to do it like that, but maybe every 5 years or so, we should just do a review and look at these numbers and look at asking for an increase. I know that it all is based on our budget constraints, but to be, and I'm thinking another $10,000, bringing it up to 40,000, but to me that seems, manageable in light of our budget. So that was my thought. So I do support the tiers. I'd like to tweak it a little more. I think the group D, we need to increase that because I think I saw like 3,000 households in some of the neighborhoods. And it just seems like a huge discrepancy between like group D and the other groups. So however we can tweak it to make the per household amount equitable by increasing the budget is what I would suggest. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, okay. Now I'll go back to my discussion of participation. Just because you have a huge neighborhood, how many people are really going to participate? So you're going to give, they might have 3,000 households, but if only 200 or so, participate in things. And do you have the breakdown of the neighborhoods by population? Yeah, number of households served. Okay, so old neighborhood. Well, you got to recuse yourself, Mayor. You're talking neighborhood, so that's.
And which one are you in, Waverly Park or Cooper Park? Which one are you?
I'm in Cooper. I'm a little bit. So, but you mentioned the 3,000 people, so that's.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let me give an example of Cooper Park, because it used to be a combination CERT, and then we started giving CERT their own money. And even though Waverly Park, where is it? We're smaller than Wagon Wheel? Oh, Cooper Park, 1,300 homes. I can tell you, and we only do one event right now. Mm-hmm. And that was tied into CERT. I'd be surprised if we get 200 people
at your Cooper Park event.
Cooper Park. Now that's the ice cream social quote, and you guys have been to it.
Yeah.
So have you seen? I mean, Lucas, Margaret, how many people you think you saw when you were there? Did you see? I mean, it was coming and going, but
at Cooper Park.
Yeah.
I don't know if there were even 100 people.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the point I'm trying to get. Is just because you got a big neighborhood, if you don't get participation, then Lucas, you haven't experienced this, so don't take it personally. But Margaret and I, we had PTAs, and PTAs are always asking for money. And I remember when my kids were in elementary, our PTA raised a lot of money. I mean, we had gobs of money, and so people are saying, "Well, teachers, what would you like?" And so teachers were just coming up with all kinds of anything. We're going, really? And so I don't want to be in the point where we give these people so much money that they're going, oh, well, hey, we got the money. Let's do something, not necessarily to the goal of making a neighborhood. And so that's why, again, balance it to, if we get the data more participation, instead of just giving a blanket funding, I think would be a helpful way to figure out how to distribute the money. I have no problem with increasing the budget. And Lucas knows that I've been doing it for, Lucas, how many you've been on? 2, you only been here 2 years, right? So for 2 years that Lucas has been on this, I've been pushing to have a special grant money per neighborhood, on a limited basis that, a big $2,000 in difference just so that they could do something for their neighborhood to improve the neighborhood. I know the visual arts, they're limited, but here's just visual arts. I keep driving around and people's doing art, and even if they could do, the neighborhood could do visual arts on the utility boxes and all that kind of stuff. I'd still like to see that. And why don't you guys do that as a parting gift for me? Why don't we just go that route? Put that, if you're going to budget to 4,000 or 10,000, put in there a 2,000, maybe start out with 1 or 2 grants for the first year and see if people actually use it and see how they utilize it. And also, so Ann and Wayne and Lisa, so let's say we had a grant program like that. So when you guys, they would have to do a proposal, right? They would propose and they would come back to, okay, so, it's hey, I would like to see that, but I'm going off topic here to Margaret's concern. So, so I would like to see that tied in, again, raising the money. So to Margaret's way of thinking, does that make a little more sense if we get participation instead of just be giving these blanket, your neighborhood, then 3,000? Lucas, your thoughts?
I feel like that's a substantial change that we would need to run by the neighborhood associations. My concern is, I think even like the best attended events, the Mauna Loma events that I've been to, for instance, have been pretty well attended. That's probably, a very small percentage of the full neighborhood.
Yeah.
And what I would be concerned about is if we don't get the percentage right, then we might inadvertently significantly constrain the amount of money and we might be granting to neighborhood associations. So I think it's a good idea in concept, and just figuring out what percentage of the neighborhood should participate in order to be eligible for the maximum amount. And I don't have the mathematic formula.
Okay. I mean, even Old Mountain View, their big ice cream social, we've all been to that. I know how much ice cream I serve. And so well, seriously, because I have tubs and I sort of base it out on that. And they also collect tickets. So they have an idea of the somewhat of an attendance on that. So there's one group. But
my thought though is if it's a bigger neighborhood and they got more funding, maybe they could do more things that would attract more participation too. Like, I guess my real issue is the per household amount the difference between, it's a $5 difference between group A and D, and that's a pretty big difference. Or like if you look at the neighborhoods, it's 56 cents per person in Old Mountain View versus, I forget what, I think it was the smaller ones get $6. So that's my concern, just is the equity of this. So, if Old Mountain View or Mauna Loma had more funding, maybe they could do more events that would attract more people to come.
But would they attract the same people though? I mean, so they have 5 events. Usually staff does each neighbor usually have one big event? I know Old Middlefield has their ice cream, Mauna Loma has their ice cream.
Like Wagon Wheel does quite a bit. I think they do the pumpkin thing and they have the ice cream social. So they're pretty active.
Yeah. So how many, do you guys have the information of which groups have oversubscribed or asked for more money than they needed?
I don't have that information with me right now, but I can provide it in follow-up.
Okay. Well, you guys are going to decide this down the road. So I'm just saying, give it some consideration. Just because you got a big group doesn't mean you get all the money. So there's got to, yes, I agree there's some equity.
I mean, it's not all the money. It's just that the little groups right now, frankly, get all, I mean, they don't get the total all the money, but per household, they get quite a bit compared to the bigger neighborhood associations. So
But
I think that's my concern is I just want to make it more like, why does, yeah, someone in, is it Dutch Haven? Why does their household get the 667 and if you're in Old Mountain View you only get $1.67? That doesn't, to me, it just doesn't make sense. It's like it should be equitable throughout the city.
well, equitable, I mean, okay.
Just to provide some thoughts. Good evening.
Yes.
This Wayne Chen, Assistant Community Development Director.
No, Wayne, there's no public. You don't have to introduce yourself.
Well, just in terms of administration, just to offer some thoughts, is that currently the review process is fairly simple and straightforward. If the committee wishes to look at additional modifications or program criteria to qualify, then I think staff would need to build in some additional criteria and framework to evaluate. It sounds like maybe one of the criteria that Chair McAllister is referring to is how well or how successful events have been attended. And then if that were the case, then probably as part of administering and reviewing and making a determination, we would need the groups to incorporate some kind of data collection throughout the year in their events, to keep that and then to send it to staff so we have that information. So I think it would require not just staff looking at grant criteria, but it would also create the need for the groups to also collect and give us the information so we can review it. So I just wanted to offer some of the some considerations if the committee wishes to maybe modify the evaluation criteria.
Well, it would just collect more data. I mean, I know Old Mountain View wanted to give out 3,000 T-shirts. And so, I mean, they could spend the whole thing on T-shirts.
Yeah, I think the flexibility that's built into the program was to offer groups the ability to determine the needs of the groups. Mm-hmm.
And I like your idea, John, of and I thought we had at one point done like a grant for neighborhood beautification. Like it was like actually something like $10,000, I thought. So, if you want to do one specifically for art or just call it that beautification grant, I'm totally open to adding that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think, Lucas? You think that'd be you've been hearing it for 2 years, so.
I think it's a good idea. I can't remember what insightful remarks I had the last time we talked about it. I think my gut tells me as long as it's well defined and we get a lot of public input about the parameters of the grant, I'm comfortable with it. I do want to be mindful of a couple of things. I think I guess I should represent my neighborhood as well, Greater San Antonio. I've been in this area for most of my life, and I can't recall ever receiving an invitation or seeing anything related to a neighborhood event. So, I the participation thing I think is important because I don't want to just have the usual suspects benefit from it. And maybe a starting point might be, I also want to be wary of staff capacity. I don't know if I want to spend a lot of time collecting data, that may not be incorporated into something that we're working on. But if staff can at least solicit from the neighborhood associations that are doing this work, how many people have attended, each of these events, and then a future CNC can decide with that information, how we can either reward or penalize neighborhood associations that have maybe better or worse participation rates. I feel like that should be a component of that. But getting back to the beautification thing, I'm okay with that. But I feel like the one thing we'd have to be sensitive to is it would likely have to be a grant for a big project rather than what we've been doing, which is reimbursing, right? I think that's the key thing. And I don't know if we really have. I don't feel like I have a good sense of how much a typical project may cost and what folks may be interested in to set aside, some amount of money for that. We might set ourselves up for failure if we provide, too little money because the projects are, much more expensive in scope than we're anticipating, and they're very costly. So only one neighborhood association gets something. And we have to balance that with, I think, the budget cuts that we're anticipating over the next couple of fiscal years. I don't know. I'm rambling. I think it's a good idea. I need to about how to approach it.
Well, thank you, Lucas. So here, I proposed a pilot program. Everybody likes the word pilot program because it's be limited. To your concerns, if we give a specific amount, and to address your concerns, let them determine what they can do with that amount of money. So but they still have to come to the committee, or once you get the parameters and say, approve it. So when you're saying too much or too little, you've already given them a parameter. Here's your pot. If you want to go beyond it, you put in your own neighborhood money, which wouldn't be a bad deal. But I think, when I go to a lot of cities, and you'll be going to these conferences soon, you go to Long Beach, or you just drive around these towns, these utility boxes, people donate their time to paint. Somebody's family member said we should pay people to paint these things. I think we can get some volunteers to do their own, could paint them themselves. And you give them a chance. It says, hey, give us a drawing. What do you think? And so I think, let's say we have 18 neighborhoods. I say we try, maybe we start with 3 neighborhoods, but you would make it a rotate just as a pilot program, $6,000. Pilot program, see how it goes the first year, reevaluate it the next time, and let them again decide if they want to go more, they pony up. If they go less, then we'll just roll it over to maybe. So you've seen these grant monies from VTA, and all of a sudden we got we got a pot of money. And so we have a criteria, okay, the people in this, 3 criteria, but let's say we get 5 requests, and all of a sudden the first 3, they don't use all the money. Well, then that would trickle down and say, okay, hey, number 4 and 5, we have some money for you as a criteria. So does that sound something that you guys would feel comfortable trying? Well, I know Margaret does. How about Lucas? Well, you said you would feel somewhat comfortable with it.
I guess the only question I have for staff would be, like, reimbursing an informal group is one thing, but giving a check to somebody is a different matter. So what criteria or restrictions do we have on how we give people grant funding?
Well, Lucas, we give people money now. What kind of criteria do we have now? You fill out a form, you say, here it is, and there's your money. So I'll let staff answer, but I think it'd be similar to what we're doing. They're going to propose what they're going to do. It's not like we're going to give them money. So staff, how do we give a neighborhood money now? It goes, do they have individual accounts, or do they give it to,
So the grant funds currently are funded through reimbursement. So it's not like a check that's given to the neighborhood group at one time. So yeah, it would be a shift if we were to distribute the funds directly. And I don't know if I am able to answer what that process would entail in terms of criteria that would need to be added.
When you give the money to the neighborhoods, do you give it to the president of the neighborhood, or do you give it to individuals that might have been a event coordinator for the neighborhood?
As part of the application process, they essentially identify 3 individuals that are kind of project leads, and then they can submit reimbursements. Yeah.
You could do the same thing. It says, you got a project, you go for the grant. We've, those 3 people. So there seems like there's a process involved. remember, we got to think out sometimes out of the box and just, I know some are conservative, but I think it's, it's not a lot, $6,000, think of how many times we spent more than that on a conversation going, well, what do we should do this? So maybe out of Margaret's 10,000, 6 could be for grants and 4 could be for neighborhoods.
Probably the main item here, as Anna mentioned, is developing an evaluation criteria and for us to be able to evaluate. So if there is something like this, then we would probably seek some direction from the committee about what are the eligible types of activities or projects. How do we determine that these are worthy projects to be funded, those types of things. And it reminds me a little bit about the process we had started with the public art strategy and going through that, which is how do we determine those types of projects? And so I think those would be some of the questions that we would want to get some either additional feedback or time to think about in terms of like setting up the program, especially the evaluation criteria.
Yeah, so it'd be the neighborhood improvement grant. That's what I call it, neighborhood improvement grant, very simple. And go ahead.
Well, so we had that, the
When?
neighborhood beautification grant. Maybe it was before your time, John, but
We
had it. It was 10,000. I think it was $10,000. I don't remember. Maybe we could look back to see how many neighborhoods used it, what they did and base it on that. But yeah, if it was successful, then I'd say, why don't we just, recreate that or just copy it, right? And, update it if we need to. But yeah, it's not like we haven't done this before, so it shouldn't be too hard to put together. It would just be a question of how much would we want to put into it. And I don't know, so for me, I'm open to doing that program, but I guess I'd want to see the dollar amount. So, I want to put some money aside to trying to make the dollar per household amount more equitable, and then base it on that as to how much should go to this beautification program. But I can't remember. It was some kind of a special fund that we got. We had extra money from, I think, and that's why we did that grant program.
We can go back and do some research and find the program information.
Yeah, that was well, a grant program shouldn't be based on the neighborhood because a project it could be independent of
Yes, yeah. So it'd be a separate project, and
Okay.
But if
so wants to change the formula to the proposed tiers. The formula, Margaret just wants to change the dollar amounts, right?
And the tiers. So I want to do the tiers, but I want, even in the tiers, there's a big discrepancy. So I want to equal that out a little bit more.
Do you want to add a tier?
I don't know if it's adding a tier or just adding more funding to the, larger, like group D and even C. So if we say ask council for $10,000 more, I don't know how much, but whatever it is, then I would put the money towards these group C and D to just get that per household amount closer to the smaller.
Well, how about if we take group B and go group A is 1 to 150, group B 150 to 500, group C 500 to 1,000, since that was the 500 increments, and just add and have 5 groups.
And then go 1,500 to.
So instead of the B, which has the biggest group, just break that down into 150 to 500, and then redo your allocation.
Well, but group A, you're saying that the staff
so maybe
$1,000 to do anything.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, okay, so you trim some from $1,000. You trim it down.
But staff was saying that most events or whatever activities cost at least
$1,000. Okay. So that's just a starting point. Yeah.
Now, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So we just increase the others, to try to match group A as close as we can.
Okay. So we might.
I was going to
go ahead, Wayne. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. We could take, if perhaps direction is, why don't maybe the request is to consider a 40,000 program size, and we can play with the groups, and perhaps when we return to the CNC in the first meeting to start the neighborhood process again next year, we could bring back maybe final recommendations and then provide some information about how this would be folded into sort of the budget process. And then based on the committee's recommendation at the time, we can use that final formula to incorporate into next year's grant program. Would that be, if that works, then we can certainly go back and work on it. And if there's any other parameters you would like in terms of recommending the different tiers, we can take the input back and then play around with it.
Yeah. So we were talking about, you guys were concerned. So the neighborhoods already give you estimated crowds. So that information is not extra. It's being provided. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so the information is coming in. Okay, can we go back to your questions, please?
Mhm.
Okay, so they asked us. So okay, everybody feel comfortable with bullet point 1 and bullet point 2?
If I can clarify, so if we're providing a $10,000 increase, is that just for the existing program, or is a portion of that also for the beautification program? Jesse, I didn't catch that.
Well, Wayne could maybe say, look at, well, if Margaret wants that, I'm saying then we put another 6,000 or 16,000, or maybe when staff comes back and says, hey, here's how we could do equity. We don't need the full 10,000, but maybe we could, let's give staff an open-ended, say 16,000 max, tend to see if we do the equity, do we really need to use it all? And if we don't, then we can put 6,000 and come up with some kind of a formula to make it work that way. Okay,
I'm okay with that, but 16,000 is a pretty big jump. Can we do that within the 10,000 that the mayor had suggested?
No, that's what I'm saying. 0 to 16,000. So that's like staff may look at trying to get the equity, and they may not need the full 10,000, and so they could put some of that into the grant. Lucas, it's 16,000. You voted no on or yes on many projects. I mean, look at our budget. But I'm just giving them that parameter. Let them come back with a recommendation to see how they could answer the equity question and the participation question, because to me it's tied together, the equity and just leave it.
We can certainly play within the 16,000 range, and then we'll clarify that a portion of that would be sort of ongoing program budget, and then the other part is really a pilot program. It sounds like for at least 1 year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. That
Okay.
sounds good.
Okay, and do you need a motion on that one? Yeah, let's have a motion just to. Okay, Wayne, summarize it, and then Lucas will make a.
So I think the recommendation is to use the concept of the tiers, but to modify the tiers, and then to evaluate a grant program within the $16,000 parameter and figure out which portion of it would go ongoing to increase the program budget, and which part of it would go to a pilot program for neighborhood beautification. And staff will bring back proposed or final recommendations to the first CNC meeting in 2021.
So let me word tweak it versus neighborhood beautification versus neighborhood improvement.
Got it.
Would it make, you guys, Margaret, Lucas, does it matter that it's improvement? So it could be other, they put in trees, benches, something else in their neighborhoods. So, okay. Lucas, are you okay with, do you still understand, would improvement be a little broader so that they give them more leeway, or do you feel comfortable?
I'm fine either way. I think beautification is a little bit sort of narrower in scope, and if we're fine with allowing other types of improvements, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. So does anybody want to take Wayne's recommendations and make a motion?
I'll go ahead and move what Wayne had just said.
That's it. Okay. Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay. I'm going to dispense with the roll call vote, but I see. I think it's a unanimous 3-0 vote on that one. Yay. Okay. Wave your hand. There we go. Bullet point number 3. I think we got everything covered there. So how about the format? I had a concern about the 4 o'clock meeting time. I mean, even though we still had good participation, I do remember Lucas last year, we had sellout rooms. We had 80. I mean, I thought, even though it says that we had about 50 or so, I just know that we did have people working. There was comment. So is there any discussion from Lucas or Margaret about maybe modifying that 4 o'clock start time?
So I do have a preference for a later meeting because I think it's more accessible for people. I do appreciate the staff discussion about just workload, and when you have it at 7 o'clock, that's after hours for a lot of folks, and it's a pretty big commitment. So I don't know what the balance is, but I do want to be sensitive to that.
Margaret, your thoughts?
Yes, I agree. I think if later time is better for the public. I would, if we're still in this COVID world, I would say even like a, 5 o'clock start or 5:30 would work better than 4. And I guess, I was thinking too. I guess we went to. I felt like one of the ones I missed the last one with the mobile home park, but the one before that we might have ended early because we got through the questions quickly. So I don't know if we want to even say 5 to 7 and have to sit around till 7. Like if we just say 5 or whatever the start time is, and assume we're going 90 minutes. But could go 2 hours if we need to. I think, if there's some way we can add flexibility to the end time, that would be helpful.
Well, Margaret, because you weren't at the last meeting, we were able to end
early, right?
We were able to. No, I mean, I still think the 5 to 7 because it gives people an idea, and I like starting later. I know you guys are talking workload for staff, but we are the council neighborhood committee. We're there for the neighborhood. And so I think starting later would be more appropriate. But we started at 6 and we had the people, and we even opened it up to public discussion on Lucas Ramirez's suggestion at the very end. And zip, I mean, there was silence. So we said, thank you very much. And we went home, and did it even last an hour? Anna?
Maybe about an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we had no problem saying thank you, and we left. So.
Okay. Yeah. I just, if we don't have any more questions, I say, let's just wrap it up and end it instead of, waiting till the time. Thinking maybe someone's going to show up at the end, right?
Yeah, no, we don't. No, I'm not like Margaret. Okay, Bob? Can you get to the phone, Bob? Bob, can you try, Bob, change this? No, I'm just kidding. You spent 3 minutes. Hey, Bob, I'm sorry. Take that offline. So
you're recording.
Okay. Well, the attendee. Well, that's okay. Okay, so that the meetings were great. Staff was there. We answered the questions. You did a good job of answering questions, getting people information, rolling it to chat. Anna, you did a great job moderating it. And so, and the rest of the staff. So I think that worked out well, but I would still think maybe 7. I mean, people are still working, or they got family and they got to feed people. So if you do it at 5 to dinner or whatever, I still think our normal 7 to 9 virtual, because if you're consistent, everybody knows year to year. This was a unique year, so you moved it up earlier.
Yeah.
And so we've been doing it 8 years, except for this year at 7 to 9, and we got good participation. I mean, we used to get some meetings where we're full house, And I remember the trailer parks in the past, they used to be a full house too.
The
So,
mobile home parks, you mean?
yes. Thank you. I've been blowing that all on. The mobile home parks. So, okay, let me go back to our script. The staff, did
So
we
was
answer
that
all?
clear? Was that clear to staff?
Yeah.
It wasn't clear to me. So
Which
we're
part?
saying later, but
Okay,
um,
I would prefer going back to the traditional 7 to 9,
so even if we're in COVID, doing
even if you're in COVID.
really,
Because people still, at 5 o'clock, they're coming home or they're in transition, they got to make dinner, whatever.
yeah. See, and I think in this COVID world, people are fine with like 5 o'clock before dinner, and then they just want to be able to, eat dinner and then do whatever, unwind. So if we're still in COVID, I actually think 5 is fine. But I don't know. What do you think, Lucas? You're the word. Oh, okay. I got a thumbs up. Haha.
Okay. I can count. Staff, why don't you reevaluate it and then come back? You'll see what, because you got feedback. I mean, I saw some of the surveys. So, okay. Any other items that you guys would like to bring up concerning the meetings? I do miss the cookies, but that's tough.
Well,
We
you
can have-
can come to, when we're open, you can actually come to the CNC meetings to have the cookies.
Yeah. Well, you're not coming to my neighborhood next year, so I don't think I'm unless Lucas is the chair again. So I hope you stay on it, Lucas, and you guys. Okay. Okay, the staff got enough on your questions and comments back on feedback on what we thought was how you ran the meetings. Everything seemed real.
Yes.
Wayne does have to change his background because it's misleading. It actually looks like he's working, so we got to get rid of that one. Lucas, you got to jump. You're gonna be missing. Okay, we had a discussion. Any committee staff comments, questions, committee reports? No? Okay, I just got to tell you guys, 8 years. I really have enjoyed working on this committee. I enjoy getting out there. I get to talk to people, and they get to know you personally, so they don't. So it's a thrill. I think this is one of the best community projects, things that we have going. And you hear us how we always talk about Mountain View is rare that does this stuff. So keep it going. I think it's great, and it's there. So when people say, "Well, you don't listen to us," I go, "Hey, we were at your neighborhood last week. Where were you? You could have had everybody that you can answer your questions to." So it's a great one. Lucas, jump on it. Be nice to the mayor, and they'll get you the job.
And thank you, Chair, and for being on the committee for 8 years. That's quite an accomplishment.
It is a compliment. No. So, okay.
That's going to be proclamation, Don.
Huh?
That's going to be on your proclamation. Probably the only council member.
I hope so. Yeah. CNC perpetual. We have. Oh, hey, the grant money could be John McAllister Perpetual Grant Improvement Fund. Okay. Does staff any?
Put your own money into it, sure.
Yeah, we could do that.
Ooh, I'm going to quote you on that one.
Oh, the recording just went blank. Oh, it's just like the Nixon tapes. We're missing that segment. Oh, that's right. Lucas is too young. So is staff. What am I talking about? They don't even know who Nixon was. Okay, we're going too far. I know you want to cut it off. So does staff have any? We're pretty good. Everybody understand where we're at? Well, hey, I really appreciate you guys thinking about that grant program. I think it's could be something unique and great. Okay, then it is 6:10, and I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Chair and Councilmember McAllister. And
Here we go. Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you, Anna, for setting up. Lisa, thank you for, and Wayne, always a pleasure to have